So, what is the difference between these two books? Well, to most people, I would say absolutely nothing. Both fictional storybooks with no historical value to them at all. And I believe that if someone said that, they would be wrong. Because today, I want to explain to you that the Bible is actually a very historical book that is full of a lot of credible information. My knowledge on this comes from much research I've done on reading books and going to websites about this sort of thing. And I believe that this is relevant to talk about because this is arguably a Christian country and many people are of the Christian faith. And I think that learning about what they believe in is important to understanding and tolerance of what they believe in. So today we're going to start by going to give some basic facts about it. Then I'm going to show some proofs that back up that not everything in it has been fabricated. And then I'm going to look at how the text has not been altered over the centuries. So, first of all, according to BibleStudyTools.com, the Bible is 66 books long, written by over 40 authors, range from shepherds, kings, generals, fishermen, and it was written over a period of 1,500 years. The final book, Revelation, written in the year 95 AD, and also was written in 3 different languages over 3 continents. That would be Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And according to statisticbrain, there have been over 6 billion copies of it printed, making it the most printed book ever by a few billion copies. Now, I want to talk about how some events in the Bible have been proven to not be fabricated. So, according to ProveBible.com, one of the biggest contributors to proving that the Bible is not made up was a man called Flavius Josephus, who was a historian, lived between the years of 0 and 100 AD. He was a historian, he was not a Christian. He was contracted by the Romans to document historical events. In his writings, he clearly references Jesus and crucifixion and all that. So that proves that it was not fabricated. He was not a Christian, neither was the Roman Emperor Tiberius, who recruited him. Also, many historical, archaeological finds have been dug up to prove that the Bible, things in it, were real. For example, the walls of the city of Jericho were discovered, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were discovered. Of course, God rained fire on the cities, and interestingly enough, the city ruins show that there was a massive fire there thousands of years ago. And lastly, the Hittites were a war clan, the longtime enemy of the Israelites in the Old Testament. For a very long time, they were believed to have been myth, until, of course, their capital city was found in Turkey, proving that they did in fact exist. It's just an example of how it exists. Now, let's talk about how the text has been unaltered throughout the centuries. Well, according to Faith Search, historians will use 3 questions to determine whether a historical text is accurate, not just the Bible. And those 3 questions are: how many handwritten copies of the text have been found? How long since the initial writing was the first copy made? How accurate are they? Well, let's examine the first question. For the Bible, 24,000 copies of the New Testament have been found. And for comparison, the Iliad, this is a book, 643 copies. The Julius Caesar's War Diaries, 10. I did a speech on that, actually. And on Plato, 7 copies of his works have been found. Now, the second question, how long since the initial writings of the Bible was written? The first copy of the New Testament was made less than 100 years after its writing. And, for example, for comparison, Plato's work, 1,250 years passed from when the first copy was made. And lastly, the last question of how accurate are the copies? Well, according to Dr. Bruce Metzer of Princeton University, he believes that the distortion rate of the Bible's text is 0.2%. For comparison, Iliad is 0.49. So this comes out to 40 lines of possibly changed text in the Bible and 700 lines of Iliad. And the Iliad is generally regarded in classrooms as being historically accurate. That's very interesting. Now, in conclusion, I just want to say that we learned quite a lot. The Bible is not one book, but many. There's much historical evidence to back it up, and the text has been unaltered since its original writing. And I want to remind everyone, the purpose today is not to convert anyone or to try to make anyone Christian, but rather to just shed some light on the book that over 2 billion people base their lives on, and just to share understanding. Thank you.
All right, well, I like the attention device at the beginning with the 2 books that you held up. I think you do want to maybe emphasize what the texts are so that people can see. The cover of the Bible doesn't indicate that it's the Bible. It's not very clear, and the halo cover is a little dark, and so if people don't, if they're not paying close attention, they're going to miss that. The notion that there is some controversy over it because both might be considered works of fiction, I think that you transition to your point relatively clearly. I do think maybe you could give us a little bit more context for that controversy, but we know exactly where you're going, and I appreciated that. And I thought that there was a pretty solid preview. The secondary points sometimes they're not really phrased as complete ideas. The first one especially seemed like it was just a label for a group of information without necessarily coming to any conclusion or support for that particular point, just like here's a category. The other 2 points I thought were a little bit more clearly developed. The visual elements of the presentation, I think you step out from behind the demo station. I think that's pretty effective. You do kind of change the orientation of your body when you're speaking. Once in a while you have to kind of turn back and speak over your shoulder, but you're usually not doing that for a long period of time. There were a couple of indicators while you were speaking to emphasize points. I think you could probably be a little bit more demonstrative. I think your facial expressions need to be a little bit less mundane. You need to be a little bit more expressive and forceful and outgoing with some of those things. I think that's one of the places where you're kind of shielding yourself a little bit as a speaker from the audience, and they'd appreciate knowing how you feel about that, your enthusiasm, your frustration, how you're amazed at something, that kind of thing, and you need to maybe work a little bit on those sorts of things. The eye contact, you look out at the audience a lot, but it really feels like you're just scanning the audience instead of engaging the audience. And part of that may be the room, because it's so wide, you're just trying to get everybody in. But I do think you need to kind of focus in on members of the audience from time to time, and it really just feels sometimes like you're checking, making sure everybody's out there still, but not really looking at people. You're kind of looking in their direction, but not pausing to engage anybody, and so that's maybe a little bit of a drawback. Your voice is pretty effective, although there are a couple of times when it drops out. You'll notice that a lot of people do this whenever there's a moment of uncertainty, or sometimes they do it as a transition thing. It's sort of like the last half of the sentence trails off and they drop down like that. And then they get started going in. And it's a little odd to me that happens But it does, and you do that occasionally. So try and watch for that. Be a little bit more consistent. I thought there was good variety in your pitch, in your voice, in the pitch of your voice. See, if your facial expression matched the variety of pitch, I think you'd be in better shape. So when you listen back, see if you can detect what I'm talking about. It moved along pretty well, and I thought that you had a nice summary at the end that reminded us of the point that you were trying to make. Thank you.